Hello, welcome to another Crabs, Goats and Goats, where on this edition, coming from my balcony, talking about the lunar eclipse happening on Wednesday. You can see the moon behind me, still in Scorpio, preparing to go into Sagittarius for the lunar eclipse on Wednesday. So let's look at the chart for that now. Okay, so I do these videos every time there's a new moon or a full moon, but some are more powerful than others. This week we have a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. Eclipse season is now on the Gemini Sagittarius axis, and of course we have 2 eclipse seasons every year, and at the moment it's happening in May, June, and at the end of the year in November. And what does an eclipse signify? Well, the first thing is that it kind of is a landmark. So a lot of new moons and full moons indicate either a starting point for a new moon, or for full moon it's a kind of climax. And what we can see at full moons, like this lunar eclipse, is a releasing of pressure. Eclipses are a bit different to your normal new moons and full moons. They seem to have wider implications, and we can feel something that is, in a sense, more heavier than normal. And I, for one, and I know other people, have been feeling a bit more lethargic and a bit more weighed down over the last 7 days or so, approaching this full moon. So the first thing to say about it is that if you have been feeling like that, well, hopefully the new moon can alleviate some of that pressure. The eclipse can alleviate some of that pressure on Wednesday, and you can begin to get your energy back after that lunation. The signs of Sagittarius and Gemini are about movement and freedom to move. So this is the first area that we can look at with possible implications for this eclipse. Find the houses of your chart with the Gemini Sagittarius axis and think about how much freedom you've had in those areas in the last 6 months since the last eclipse. Because there was a full moon eclipse in Gemini, at the end of November last year, which was very similar in the sense of the things that it raised. So if there were issues around the turn of the month to November to December for you in 2020, 2021, May 25th, 26th, this eclipse now will bring up similar issues and perhaps resolve something that came up then. Perhaps just bring another chapter in that story, but watch for those houses where you have Gemini and Sagittarius, because they can tell you about how restricted you feel, about whether you can have more freedom, and what happens at this eclipse can raise those questions. Gemini and Sagittarius also about communication. They're also about the messages we put across, and Sagittarius is the wider message of philosophy and beliefs and ideals, whereas Gemini is more the everyday neighbor communication that we use to achieve our goals, the communication we need to get our message across on a wider level or a local level. And Gemini is to do with things like speech and words, as is Mercury, the planet that rules it, which is also in Gemini at the moment. But it's about to turn retrograde. So messages at this full moon could be very confused, because Mercury's already in its shadow period, going, about to turn retrograde in Gemini and spend a while in Gemini because of this movement. But it's not at its most, it's not at its clearest, it's not at its most lucid. It's at a point where people can be saying shit for the fun of it to be honest. So try not to take everything seriously that you're being told, and turn the stone over to see what it really is. Because Mercury is also square Neptune, and it's going to retrograde to make a square with Neptune. And it's also conjunct Venus, so there's a lot of pleasantry around. There's a lot of people being sweet and nice, but not very deep, right? So this full moon, you need, if somebody's making a promise that this full moon is not backed up, yeah, it doesn't mean a lot. And it's a great time for poetry. It's a great time for anything to do with communicative art, because Neptune square Mercury and Venus will bring out all kinds of dreamy stuff. But it's not a great time to tie down details of a contract, for example. Eclipses aren't the best times to initiate things. I actually did my first video in this series at the eclipse last year, so I shouldn't talk, but it was an interesting choice. So I suppose for me, I do things when I feel them. I'm ruled by the moon, Cancer, ascendant moon in Cancer, so I'm ruled by my feelings. I don't plan astrologically very well. I know a lot of astrologers do. They wait for the right time astrologically. I'm not very good at that. The moon is my mistress, I would say. So Mercury is coming back towards Venus, squaring Gemini while we have the Sun in the sign of communication and networking. Now, there will be a much better time in terms of the Gemini energy around the solar eclipse. However, Mercury will also be retrograde at that time. But the other thing that Gemini and Sagittarius both rule is travel. Gemini on a local level, Sagittarius on a wider level. Now, people are starting to travel again. They start to move around again. There may be something coming up to do with that at this full moon. Changes in that area, perhaps in terms of the regulation, perhaps in terms of the incidents around that. But again, full moons are not the best time to make a decision, make a change, and decide on traveling. So hold on with that. More will become clear later. It is being squared by Jupiter here. You can see the Sun and Moon and a T-square with Jupiter, which is kind of amplifying all the energy. Jupiter square the Sun and Moon. I mean, if your chart is not particularly challenged by this eclipse, Jupiter may give a kind of payout aspect in the house that it's transiting. There may be something, if you look at Jupiter and where it is going by transit through your chart, you may find at this eclipse that it can offer you something. I personally, my feeling with eclipses is that they bring out what's been waiting to happen, but often unexpectedly. And then you realize afterwards, okay, that was building up and I didn't see it. I had a personally very difficult thing that happened at the last eclipse, and it took me by surprise, and I don't get taken by surprise very often. And it was to do with the house of the eclipse that the eclipse was running through. So pay attention to where Jupiter is transiting in Pisces. We talked about Jupiter in Pisces in the last video. Pay attention to where that is in your chart, because the eclipse can bring you something there. It can also amplify mess. Sagittarius and Gemini are messy signs. They don't clear up after themselves very often. That doesn't mean if you're a Gemini or a Sagittarius you don't do that. Everything depends on your chart and where all the planets are. But as signs, symbolically, they don't like looking back. They like looking forward. They like exploring, Sagittarius, or being curious, Gemini. And Jupiter will amplify that. It amplifies this, where am I going? What can I do? What's happening? Energy. Now, that works both ways. It can be incredibly interesting. You may find something fascinating coming up to do with these mutable houses of Gemini, Sagittarius, and Pisces, wherever they fall in your chart. You may find something coming up that is a never-ending story, getting lost in the journey, which is great. Neptune's also in Pisces, so that journey is never-ending right now. But it can also bring out a lot of things that are going absolutely nowhere. So the full moon could reveal this for you, that something is going absolutely nowhere, but it could also just put you on a trip that is just for the fun of it, right? And I'm not talking necessarily about travel. I'm talking about a personal learning journey, maybe, or a pleasure, something pleasurable. It's certainly not a time when people are exercising self-restraint very effectively. And that has been the case planetarily, that when Saturn was in Capricorn, Saturn's now in Aquarius, when Jupiter was in when Jupiter was in Capricorn and Aquarius up until very recently, self-restraint was actually easier to practice but now with Jupiter in Pisces and this full moon, discipline is, it may not be your strong point right now. Don't just let that go. Just let that go. Let that be. Just go with it. Later, when the sun goes into Cancer, you'll find that it's easier to get a hold of things. When Mercury's not retrograde in a few weeks, you'll find that easier things to get back into the way you want them to. So diversion, interestingly, in Latin languages, diversión in Spanish means fun. It means having pleasure. And so not being on the route that you're on in English is what diversion is. And there's a kind of connection between those two ideas, is not just staying on the same route, not doing things the way you always do them. This is very much a theme for the full moon. Of course, you need to be careful not to think you're going somewhere incredibly important when you don't have the assurances that you are, because there are none right now. We are entering a kind of Wild West type time of the year in this Gemini season, because Jupiter's gone into Pisces. This is the time when anything can happen, actually. So for the last 6-7 days before the full moon eclipse and for the following 3 weeks with Mercury retrograde, we're kind of entering a period of the year where things are not under control. And on a personal level, I think the best way to cope with that is to, as much as you can, and obviously, it's great for me to say, let things go, just chill out, man. Yeah, I know that's not possible for some people and in their lives. But if it is possible for you to just let go of control, now is the time to do it, because this is the time astrologically to look around, see what's going on, and take your cues from the universe. I'm not one of those people that would always say that. But right now, this week, next week, this is the time to look around you, see what's going on, and bring yourself into a position where you can take advantage of that, or at least defend yourself from more malefic, malignant influences that could come up at this time. And like I said earlier, there is a lot of potential in terms of art, writing. I mean, writing in the sense of experimentation more than writing in the sense of clarification, because Mercury is not helping that. But this is the time to very much Just see what's going on and pay attention where people are going to go into excess mode, because excess right now is not something you want to be doing. Jupiter squaring the full moon is encouraging this, and I would say that the thing that you most need to avoid is going to excess. Now, I've also said that restraint is not easy to practice. So, just be aware that is an issue right now, but also that this is a peak of that excessive energy on Wednesday. So from the weekend, we should see it being easy, a bit calmer, if still very undirected kind of energy at that time. Okay, well, that is all I'm going to say about this lunar eclipse. Do check out people like Judith Hill, who've written a lot of great stuff about eclipses. There's YouTube videos out there featuring her talking about that. I've seen myself talk nicely about transits relating to the moon's nodes as well. So have a great eclipse. Revel in the light, revel in the night, and be good to yourself, be kind to yourself. Okay, don't feel like you're letting yourself down. That's the biggest thing to avoid right now.